My hands wouldn't stop shaking as they dragged me onto the stage. The spotlight burned my eyes, but I couldn't look away from the crowd of faces below. Hungry eyes. Predatory smiles. These weren't people. They were monsters shopping for their next toy. I'm Kim Jae-woo, 23 years old, and this is how my life ends. 3 weeks ago, I had a normal life. I worked 2 jobs to support my family. My little brother Miho was sick, desperately needing surgery we couldn't afford. When those loan sharks came to our door with their slick suits and poisonous promises, I thought I was saving him. I signed papers I didn't fully understand. I borrowed money at rates that would drown us. Then my father's gambling addiction destroyed everything. The debt tripled overnight. When I couldn't pay, they didn't just take our apartment. They took me. Lot 17, the auctioneer announced, his voice echoing through the warehouse. Unmated Omega, age 23, healthy, clean blood work. Shall we start at 50 million won? My stomach twisted. I was livestock. Merchandise. The silver collar around my neck felt like it was choking me, the chain attached to it held by a guard who smirked at my tears. Hands shot up across the room. 60 million. 70. 80. The numbers climbed so fast I felt dizzy. These people were bidding on my entire existence like I was a painting at some twisted gallery. Then the room went silent. The massive doors at the back slammed open, and everyone turned. Even the auctioneer's practiced smile faltered. A man walked in, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than my family's yearly income. His dark hair was styled back, revealing a face that belonged on magazine covers except for the dangerous edge in his sharp features. But it was his eyes that terrified me. Cold. Calculating. The eyes of someone who had killed and would do it again without hesitation. His presence commanded the room. People actually stepped back to let him pass. I caught whispers from the crowd. That's Kang Tae-hyun. The Black Serpent boss himself. What's he doing here? My blood turned to ice. Everyone in Seoul knew that name. Kang Tae-hyun ran the most powerful criminal organization in the city. He controlled everything from the docks to the nightclubs, from politicians to police. People who crossed him simply disappeared. He walked straight to the front, his expensive shoes clicking against the concrete floor. When he looked up at me, our eyes met, and I forgot how to breathe. There was something in his gaze. Recognition? Possession? I couldn't tell, but it made my Omega instincts scream in confusion. Submit. Both at once. 500 million won, he said, his voice deep and absolute. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. That was nearly 10 times the current bid. The auctioneer stammered, going once. Going twice. His gavel hit the podium. Sold to Mr. Kang. Just like that, I belonged to the most dangerous man in Seoul. Everything happened in a blur. Documents were signed. Money transferred. The guard removed my chain and handed it directly to Tae-hyun like I was a dog being delivered to its new owner. I wanted to fight, to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't work. Fear paralyzed me completely. Come, Tae-hyun said simply, turning toward the exit. Not a request. A command. I followed because what choice did I have? His men surrounded us as we walked to a black luxury car waiting outside. One of them opened the door, and Tae-hyun gestured for me to get in. I climbed into the leather interior, and he slid in beside me. The door closed, sealing my fate. The drive through Seoul's nighttime streets felt surreal. I pressed myself against the opposite door, as far from him as possible. He didn't speak, just stared out the window, occasionally checking his phone. The silence was suffocating. We arrived at a towering building in Gangnam, the most exclusive district in the city. The penthouse elevator required a fingerprint scan. My new prison was literally at the top of the world. When the elevator doors opened directly into his apartment, I gasped despite myself. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the entire glittering city below. The space was massive, decorated in dark modern tones with artwork that probably cost millions. Everything screamed power and wealth. This is your room, Tae-hyun said, opening a door to reveal a bedroom larger than my entire former apartment. It had its own bathroom, a massive bed with silk sheets, and a closet already filled with clothes in exactly my size. How long had he planned this? I finally found my voice. "What do you want from me?" He turned, and for the first time, his expression softened slightly. "Right now? I want you to rest. You look exhausted." "That's it." I couldn't keep the hysterical edge from my voice. "You spent 500 million won just to tell me to sleep? You're under my protection now," he said carefully. "No one will hurt you here. Not even me." I laughed bitterly. "You bought me at an auction. You already hurt me." Something flickered in his eyes. "Regret? I know how it looks. But I saved you from whoever else would have bought you tonight. Trust me when I say I was the best option in that room." He wasn't wrong, and I hated that. "So what am I? Your servant? Your prisoner?" "You're mine," he said simply, and the possessiveness in his voice made my omega instincts shiver. "But I'm not a savage. Rest tonight. We'll talk tomorrow." He left, closing the door behind him. I stood there shaking, processing everything. Then I noticed he hadn't locked it. I could leave the room freely. That surprised me more than anything else tonight. I collapsed onto the bed, still wearing the thin auction clothes, and finally let myself cry. My life had shattered into 1,000 pieces, and I had no idea how to put them back together. But as I drifted into exhausted sleep, one thought haunted me. Why did the most dangerous man in Seoul look at me like I was something precious? I woke up drenched in sweat, my body burning from the inside out. Not now. Not here. My heat had arrived a week early, and I was trapped in a MAFIA boss's penthouse. I stumbled out of bed, barely making it to the bathroom before the first wave of cramps hit. My omega biology had betrayed me at the worst possible moment. The suppressants I'd been taking must have worn off during the stress of the auction. Now my body was screaming for an alpha, and the most dangerous alpha in Seoul was just down the hall. I locked the bathroom door and turned on the cold shower, climbing in fully clothed. It didn't help. Nothing would help except what my body desperately craved. I bit down on my hand to keep from crying out, tasting blood. Then I smelled him. Cedarwood and smoke. Taehyun's scent flooded through the ventilation, making everything worse. My omega instincts took over, and before I knew what I was doing, I was unlocking the door and stumbling into the bedroom. He was standing in the doorway, his dark eyes wild. "Jaewoo." My name sounded like a prayer and a curse on his lips. "Your heat. I can smell it." "Please," I whimpered, hating myself for begging. "It hurts." Something in him snapped. He crossed the room in 3 strides, catching me as my legs gave out. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining control. "Once we do this, everything changes." I couldn't think straight. The heat was consuming me, and his alpha pheromones were the only thing that could extinguish the fire. "I'm sure," I whispered. What happened next blurred together in a haze of sensation and instinct. When I finally woke up, it was 2 days later. My body ached in new ways, and I was wrapped in silk sheets that smelled like both of us. Taehyun sat in a chair beside the bed, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly. "Confused," I admitted. "And surprisingly okay physically." He nodded, standing up. "I had a doctor check on you yesterday while you slept. You're healthy. I also had some things taken care of while you recovered." "What things?" He pulled out a tablet and showed me documents. "Your family's debt is paid in full. The loan sharks who sold you have been dealt with. Your brother Miho is scheduled for surgery next week at the best hospital in Seoul. All expenses covered." I stared at the screen, tears blurring my vision. "Why would you do this?" "Because you're mine now," he said simply. "And I take care of what's mine." Over the following weeks, my life became stranger than any drama I'd ever watched. Taehyun gave me complete freedom within the penthouse. He never locked me in, never forced me to do anything. He was gone most days handling his criminal empire, but when he was home, he was surprisingly gentle. He told me his story one night over dinner. How he'd been an orphan, abused by the system until he clawed his way to power. How he'd built his empire on the principle of protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, even if his methods were brutal. How he'd seen me at a charity event months ago, before everything fell apart and couldn't get me out of his mind. I didn't plan the auction, he admitted. But when my informant told me you'd been taken, I had to get you out. Buying you was the only way. You could have just saved me and let me go, I pointed out. His jaw tightened. I'm not that selfless. I wanted you, Jaiwoo. I still do. Despite everything, I was starting to want him too. Maybe it was Stockholm Syndrome. Maybe it was the bond forming from our heat night. Or maybe, impossibly, it was something real. Then everything went wrong. I'd convinced Taehyun to let me visit a nearby park with 2 bodyguards. I needed fresh air, needed to feel human again. We were walking peacefully when a black van screeched to a halt beside us. Men poured out, armed and organized. My bodyguards immediately moved to protect me, but there were too many attackers. Gunshots rang out. People screamed and scattered. Hands grabbed me, dragging me toward the van. Then I heard the roar. Taehyun appeared like an avenging demon, his face twisted with rage I'd never seen before. He moved with deadly precision, taking down attackers with brutal efficiency. His men flooded the park, turning it into a war zone. One attacker managed to press a knife to my throat. Back off or the Omega dies. Taehyun froze, his eyes meeting mine. In that moment, I saw genuine fear in them. Not for himself. For me. Let him go, Taehyun said, his voice deadly calm. And I'll make your death quick. Not a chance. The Park family sends their regards. Before anyone could react, Taehyun moved. The gunshot was deafening. The knife clattered to the ground as my captor fell, a perfect hole in his forehead. Taehyun caught me before I collapsed, holding me against his chest. I've got you, he whispered into my hair. You're safe. I'm so sorry. Back at the penthouse, I couldn't stop shaking. Taehyun held me on the couch, his arms wrapped protectively around me. The Park family runs a rival organization, he explained. They knew hurting you would hurt me. This is my fault. I should have kept you safer. This is your world, I said quietly. Violence and danger. Yes. And I'm pulling you into it just by keeping you near me. He pulled back to look at me. I can arrange for you to leave. New identity, protection, money. You'd be free. My heart clenched. Is that what you want? What I want is irrelevant. What matters is keeping you alive. But as I looked into his eyes, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want to leave. Somewhere along the way, this dangerous man had become my safety. This gilded cage had become home. Before I could respond, a wave of nausea hit me. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. When I came back, Taehyun was watching me with concern. Are you sick? Should I call the doctor? I'm fine, I said, but the nausea came again the next morning. And the morning after that. 2 weeks later, I stared at the positive pregnancy test in my trembling hands. The heat night had consequences I hadn't considered. I was carrying Taehyun's child. Now I had to decide, tell him or run while I still could. I couldn't keep the secret anymore. The pregnancy test sat hidden in my drawer for 3 days while I worked up the courage. Every time I looked at Taehyun, the words stuck in my throat. How do you tell the most dangerous man in Seoul that he's going to be a father? I finally told him over breakfast on a quiet Sunday morning. He was reading reports on his tablet, looking perfectly composed in a simple black shirt. I set down my chopsticks, my hands shaking. Taehyun, I need to tell you something. He looked up immediately, reading the seriousness in my voice. What's wrong? I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. His face went completely blank. The tablet slipped from his hands and clattered onto the table. For 10 agonizing seconds, he just stared at me. Then his chair scraped back as he stood abruptly and crossed to me, kneeling beside my chair. Say that again, he whispered, his voice raw. I'm 8 weeks pregnant. From the heat night. His hands came up to cup my face, and I was shocked to see his eyes glistening with unshed tears. You're carrying my child? I nodded, terrified of his reaction. Would he be angry? Demanding? Instead, he pulled me into his arms so gently, like I was made of glass. Thank you, he breathed against my hair. Thank you, Jaiwoo. That's when everything changed. Within hours, Taehyun transformed into someone I barely recognized. He had a medical team arrive at the penthouse to do a full examination. He hired a live-in nutritionist. He replaced every chemical cleaning product with natural alternatives. He even had the entire apartment tested for air quality. Taehyun, this is excessive, I protested as workers installed additional air purifiers. Nothing is excessive when it comes to you and our baby, he said firmly, reviewing a list on his phone. I also ordered pregnancy books. 43 of them. They arrive tomorrow. 43. I want to be prepared. Prepared was an understatement. By week 10, I couldn't walk to the bathroom without him hovering nearby. He monitored everything I ate, checked my vitamin intake, and insisted I rest constantly. When I wanted to take a short walk, he assigned 6 bodyguards instead of 2. I feel like I'm in prison again, I complained one afternoon, frustrated by the constant supervision. His face fell. I'm sorry. I just can't lose you. Either of you. My anger melted at the genuine fear in his eyes. I took his hand and placed it on my still flat stomach. We're not going anywhere. But you need to trust that I can take care of myself too. He nodded reluctantly, though the security detail stayed at 6. The comedic moments helped. I woke up one night to find him on the nursery floor at 2 in the morning, surrounded by instruction manuals, trying to assemble a crib. It's been 4 hours, he muttered, glaring at the pieces. I've negotiated with international arms dealers. I've restructured entire criminal operations. Why can't I build this thing? I laughed so hard I cried. We have 4 months until the baby comes. I want to be ready. Despite his overprotective tendencies, I was falling deeper in love with him. He talked to my belly every night, telling our baby stories in his deep voice. He attended every doctor's appointment, holding my hand and asking detailed questions. When I craved strange food combinations at midnight, he personally went out to get them. At 12 weeks, Taehyun arranged for my family to visit. Seeing Miho healthy after his successful surgery made me sob with relief. My parents were wary of Taehyun at first, but watching how carefully he treated me softened them. He loves you, my mother whispered while Taehyun was showing Miho his extensive book collection. I can see it in how he looks at you. I love him too, I admitted out loud for the first time. Is that crazy? Love often is. But our happiness was fragile. At 16 weeks, during a routine check-in, Taehyun's right-hand man Juno burst into the living room, his face grim. We have a problem. Park Ji-hoon knows about the pregnancy. The temperature in the room dropped. Park Ji-hoon was the rival boss who'd ordered my kidnapping months ago. He'd been quiet since then, rebuilding his forces. Taehyun's expression turned murderous. How? A leak. We're investigating, but he's already making moves. Intelligence suggests he's planning something big. Taehyun immediately doubled security. I wasn't allowed to leave the penthouse at all. Snipers were positioned on surrounding buildings. Every entrance had armed guards. It felt like preparing for war. He'll use you to get to me, Taehyun explained, his jaw tight with tension. You and the baby are my only weakness. 2 weeks of suffocating security passed. Then Juno received a message. A video of Miho being dragged into a warehouse, terrified and crying. They have your brother, Juno said quietly. Park Ji-hoon wants a trade. Jae-woo for Miho. No, Taehyun said immediately. Absolutely not. But I was already standing, my hand protectively over my small bump. He's just a kid. I can't let him die because of me. Jae-woo, no. It's a trap. I know it's a trap, I said, meeting his desperate gaze. But he's my baby brother. I have to try. We argued for hours, but I wouldn't budge. Finally, Taehyun grabbed my shoulders, his eyes wild. I can't lose you. Don't you understand? You're everything to me. You and this baby are the only good things in my entire miserable life. Then trust me, I whispered. Trust that we'll find a way through this together. The exchange was set for an abandoned factory at midnight. Taehyun prepared his entire organization, planning every angle, every possibility. He made me wear a bulletproof vest under my loose shirt. He put a tracker in my shoe. The moment you're with Miho, you run. he instructed. Don't wait for me. Just run. I kissed him, pouring everything I felt into it. Come back to us. Always. The factory was dark and ominous. I walked in alone as instructed, my heart pounding. Miho was tied to a chair in the center, bruised but alive. Park Ji-hoon emerged from the shadows, smiling like a shark. The pregnant Omega, he said mockingly. How touching. Did you really think this would work? That's when everything exploded. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Taehyun's men had surrounded the building. But Park Ji-hoon had anticipated this. His own forces poured in, and the factory became a battlefield. Someone shoved me hard. I fell, pain shooting through my stomach as I hit the concrete. The last thing I saw before everything went black was Taehyun screaming my name, fighting desperately to reach me through the chaos. Then nothing. I woke up in darkness, my head pounding like someone had split it open. The air was thick with dampness and the smell of rust. When I tried to move, metal chains rattled against concrete, biting into my wrists. Terror shot through me instantly. My baby. I pressed my bound hands against my stomach, searching desperately for movement. Please, please, please. A tiny kick. Then another. I sobbed with relief, whispering promises into the darkness. We're going to be okay. Your daddy will find us. I know he will. The door screeched open, fluorescent light flooding in and burning my eyes. Park Ji-hoon entered, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. Behind him, 2 guards blocked the exit. The famous Omega, he said, circling me like a predator. Do you know how much chaos your alpha has caused looking for you? 15 of my warehouses burned. 32 of my men dead. He's destroying everything in his path. Good, I spat, finding courage I didn't know I had. You should be terrified. His hand cracked across my face so hard I tasted blood. Watch your mouth. That baby you're carrying? It's the only reason you're still breathing. He left me alone in the cold room. Time became meaningless. Hours? Days? They brought water but almost no food. My stomach cramped with hunger, and I worried constantly about the baby. I sang lullabies in the darkness, trying to stay calm for both of us. Then the contractions started. At first, I thought it was just stress. But they grew stronger, more regular. Pain radiated through my lower back and wrapped around my belly like a vice. No. It was too early. I was barely 20 weeks. The baby couldn't survive. Help! I screamed, panic overwhelming me. Something's wrong with the baby. A guard burst in, saw me doubled over and gasping and went pale. Boss, the Omega's in labor. Park Ji-hoon rushed in, and I saw genuine fear flash across his face. A dead baby meant losing his leverage over Taehyun. Get a doctor. Move. But before anyone could act, the world exploded. The blast shook the entire building, chunks of ceiling crashing down around us. Gunfire erupted from every direction, deafening and relentless. Through another contraction, I heard shouting, screams, the unmistakable sounds of war. Taehyun had come for me. Park Ji-hoon grabbed a gun, his composure shattering. All units, defend the lower level. Don't let them through. Another explosion rocked the building. The lights flickered and died, plunging us into chaos. In the darkness, I heard boots thundering downstairs, closer and closer. Men were screaming, dying. Then the door exploded inward. Taehyun stood in the doorway, backlit by fires burning behind him. He was covered in blood and dust, his suit torn, his eyes absolutely wild. When he saw me chained and in pain, something inhuman crossed his face. Jaiwoo, he breathed, and his voice cracked with so much raw emotion it hurt to hear. Park Ji-hoon moved behind me, pressing a gun to my temple. Don't move. I'll kill them both right now. Taehyun froze instantly, hands rising. Behind him, Juno and 20 armed men fanned out, weapons trained on Ji-hoon. The tension was suffocating. Let him go, Taehyun said, his voice deadly calm despite the desperation in his eyes. This is between us. He's done nothing to you. He exists. That's enough. Ji-hoon's gun pressed harder against my skull. Your precious Omega and his baby will die, and you'll live with that forever. Another contraction seized me, and I couldn't hold back the scream. Blood soaked through my clothes, warm and terrifying. Something was very, very wrong. He's dying. Taehyun's control shattered, his voice breaking. Please, Jihoon. You want revenge? Take it from me. But let them live. I'm begging you. I'd never heard Taehyun beg anyone for anything. The most powerful man in Seoul, brought to his knees by love and fear. Park Jihoon hesitated. For one brief moment, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. Maybe he had family once. Maybe he remembered what it meant to care about someone. Then his expression hardened. No. You took everything from me. Now I take everything from you. His finger moved on the trigger. Time slowed impossibly. I closed my eyes and thought of Taehyun, of our baby, of the life we'd never have together. 2 gunshots rang out simultaneously. I felt no pain. My eyes snapped open to see Park Jihoon stumbling backward, blood blooming across his chest. He looked down in shock, then collapsed. Behind where he'd stood, Juno lowered his smoking gun. I have 3 kids, he said quietly to no one in particular. I couldn't let him do it. Taehyun was already at my side, breaking the chains with his bare hands like they were paper. Blood dripped from his knuckles, but he didn't seem to notice. I've got you. Stay awake, Jae. Look at me. The baby, I gasped through the pain. I'm losing the baby. No. No, you're not. He lifted me effortlessly, cradling me against his chest. Hold on. Just hold on. He ran through the destroyed building, his men clearing a path. Bodies littered the floors, both his and theirs. Outside, a helicopter waited, rotors screaming. The flight to the hospital was agony. Each contraction felt like being torn apart. Taehyun held me so tightly, his face buried in my hair, whispering prayers in languages I didn't understand. You found me, I managed to say between gasps. Always. I burned half the city finding you. Tears streaked through the blood and dirt on his face. I'll always find you. At the hospital, everything became a blur of urgent voices and fluorescent lights. Doctors swarmed, shouting medical terms I couldn't process. They tried to will me away from Taehyun, but I grabbed his hand with desperate strength. Don't leave me, I begged. Never, he swore, and his grip was unbreakable. The next hours tested us both. The medical team managed to stop the premature labor, but I needed complete bed rest for weeks. The baby was okay but fragile. One wrong move could trigger labor again. Taehyun never left my hospital room. He conducted business from the uncomfortable chair beside my bed, slept there every night despite the nurses offering alternatives, and held my hand through every moment of fear and pain. On the 3rd day, he made an announcement that shocked me. I'm stepping back from the organization, he said, his voice firm with decision. I blinked at him. What? Juno will take over operations. I'll maintain minimal oversight, but I'm done with the front lines. He took my hand, pressing it against his scarred cheek. I almost lost you because of my world. I won't risk it again. You and our baby deserve a father who comes home every night. Taehyun, that's your entire life. No. He cut me off gently. You're my entire life. This baby is my life. Everything else is just noise. He pulled out a small velvet box and my breath caught. Inside was a simple silver ring with a single diamond. I'm not demanding you marry me, he said carefully. I'm asking if you'll choose me. Every day, knowing you're completely free to walk away. No debts, no obligations. Just us. Tears poured down my face. This dangerous man, this criminal who'd bought me at auction, was offering me the one thing he'd never given anyone, vulnerability. You're an idiot, I sobbed. Of course I choose you. 4 months later, I went into labor naturally at exactly 38 weeks. This time there was no violence, no fear. Just Taehyun holding my hand, looking absolutely terrified as I squeezed hard enough to bruise. You're doing amazing, he kept saying, though he looked ready to faint. You're never touching me again, I growled through a contraction. He actually laughed, kissing my forehead. We both know that's a lie. When our daughter finally arrived, tiny and screaming and absolutely perfect, Taehyun cried. He held her with shaking hands, This man who'd killed without hesitation, weeping openly at the miracle of life. "Hello, Hannah," he whispered. "I'm your daddy. I promise I'll spend every day being worthy of you." 6 months later, I stood in our new kitchen, watching through the window as Taehyun played with Hannah in the garden of our suburban home. She squealed with delight as he lifted her into the air, his laughter pure and unguarded. We'd left the penthouse, left the violence behind. Juno ran the organization now while Taehyun consulted from a safe distance. We were building something normal, something beautiful from the ashes of trauma. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "Dinner Sunday? Miho wants to show his uncle Taehyun his soccer trophy." I smiled, texting back confirmation. My family had fully embraced Taehyun, especially after he'd saved Miho's life. Taehyun came inside, Hannah babbling happily in his arms. He kissed my forehead, then my lips, his eyes soft with contentment. "Happy?" he asked. I thought about everything we'd survived. The auction, the fear, the blood and violence. But I also thought about the love we'd fought for, the family we'd created against impossible odds. "Yes," I said honestly, pulling them both close. "I'm happy." Because this wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy and complicated and built on a foundation of trauma. But it was ours. Every day, we chose each other. Every day, we chose love over darkness. Our story started in chains, but we'd found freedom together. And that made all the difference.